The day I decided to give up everything for 7 days felt like stepping off a cliff with my eyes wide open. I walked out of my routine, handed my phone to a trusted friend, closed my laptop, canceled plans, and told myself only one thing mattered for the next week: listening for God. I wasn't trying to be dramatic or spiritual for the camera. I was tired of the background noise of life, notifications, ambitions, applause, and I wanted to know if there was anything left when all that pressure was removed. I wanted to know what God would show me when I stopped doing everything for everyone and started being still enough to hear. The first 24 hours were louder than I expected. Silence has its own voice, and in that voice I heard how thin my attention had become. Instead of depth, I skimmed across conversations, faith, work, and art like a finger across a glass surface, never long enough to leave a fingerprint. On day 1, God showed me how much of my life was outsourced to performance. Prayers as routines, generosity as optics, worship as background music. The truth wrapped itself in a question: who are you when nobody is watching? That question felt dangerous and honest. I realized I had been collecting approval like trophies and mistaking them for identity. By day 2, the restlessness started. My hands reached for habits out of habit. I wanted to check my follower count, to refresh an unimportant email, to measure how I looked through other people's eyes. Instead, I walked outside and noticed small things I'd lost to speed. The way light sits on the edge of a leaf, the deep, slow inhale of a neighbor walking a dog, the rhythm of a city that isn't trying to get somewhere. Amid all these simple observations, God nudged me with another truth. Presence is a practice. Presence is choosing the actual moment over the curated one, choosing listening over speaking, choosing to receive instead of perform. This was a revolutionary revelation because it meant faith could be as mundane and as holy as washing a cup, as making a bed, as answering a text with full attention. On day 3, I faced temptation to fill the quiet with things that sound spiritual but aren't. I had to admit how often I had disguised self-importance as piety. Pride can wear a humble face. What God showed me that day was that humility is not hiding your gifts, it's offering them without a ledger. I began to pray differently. My prayers became less transactional and more relational. Instead of a shopping list to a cosmic vending machine, I started to talk like a child talking to their parent, messy, honest, clumsy, trusting. I whispered confessions I'd never said aloud and felt lighter for it. I forgave myself for past failures not because I had earned it, but because forgiveness exists and I needed it. Day 4 brought grief. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet grief of roads not taken, words left unsaid, things I had broken and never mended. God showed me that grief is an invitation, not a punishment. When we grieve, we create a space that truth can step into. I sat with names and faces I'd packed into boxes labeled later. I wrote letters I wouldn't send and found peace in the act of naming wounds. He taught me that restoration often begins with acknowledgement. Saying the truth aloud released chains I didn't even know I was holding. By day 5, my heart grew curious about belonging. I realized I had been trying to belong by becoming more palatable, rather than becoming more real. God showed me that belonging is not achieved by shrinking or by expanding in the right ways, but by showing up as you are and letting the right people meet you there. That day I sat in a church pew and did not perform prayer. I let the prayers of others wash over me. I felt connected in a way that had nothing to do with being understood and everything to do with being seen. It was a deep, aching reminder that community is not the absence of loneliness, but the presence of mutual acceptance. Day 7 arrived with a strange calm. In the final morning of my experiment, I walked to the place where I first started and sat. I realized the experiment wasn't to prove God existed or to harvest spiritual content. It was to remove the layers between me and what's true. The biggest thing God showed me in 7 days was not a dramatic sign or a sudden miracle, but a quieter reorientation. Life becomes thicker when you stop collecting it. Richness is not in the accumulation of experiences, but in their deepening. I found that faith flows from the small, faithful acts repeated daily, not from occasional grand gestures. Across those 7 days, I noticed patterns I will carry forward. I learned that silence can be scary because it calls you to a kind of honesty your curated life never demands. I learned that loneliness is not the enemy, avoidance is. I learned the difference between doing for God and being with God. Doing is measurable, but being is transformational. I learned that the heart's maps, what we reach for when we're scared, what we hide from when we're proud, are more revealing than our resumes or our public achievements. I also discovered practical shifts that changed how I live. I started small, one unhurried meal a day, 1 hour of intentional silence, one phone-free evening with real conversation. Those small practices acted like anchors. They prevented me from drifting back into the currents of busyness and provided a sanctuary when life felt too loud. God showed me that spiritual habits are not inflexible laws, but invitations, gentle disciplines that train attention toward what matters. There were surprises too. I had expected judgment or guilt to stare me down for the parts of my life that were messy. Instead, I found a kindness that was not sentimental, but courageous. A strength that held tenderly without demanding perfection. God's presence over those days felt less like corrective force and more like a patient light illuminating places I'd ignored. It wasn't condemnation, it was orientation. You might be wondering whether I recommend this to you. My honest answer is yes, with a caveat. Giving up everything for 7 days is not an escape, it's a reset. It will reveal things you will need to face, it will ask you to choose differently. But it will also show you the freighted beauty of an ordinary day, the sacramentality hidden in mundane tasks, and the radical relatability of a still, small voice that loves you just as you are and wants more of you than your achievements. If you're thinking, I don't have 7 days or I can't afford to step away, hear this. You don't need to replicate my exact experiment to taste this fruit. The heart of my experiment was attention. You can practice that in small increments. 10 minutes of unhurried breathing, a single honest conversation, a walk without a plan. These are doorway moments. God meets those small openings with the same largeness that showed up for me in a week of silence. Here are the things I'm carrying forward because they reshaped me. Staying with the uncomfortable questions, practicing humility by offering gifts without expectation, naming grief as a doorway to healing, accepting mercy without bargaining, choosing presence over performance, and building tiny rituals that reorient my day toward what truly matters. These are not headline-grabbing revelations, but they are durable. They are the kind of changes that don't need an audience to stick. If you're still watching, if you've stayed with me so far, I want to say thank you and to ask for your courage. Try a day of less. Try asking one honest question of yourself and sit with the answer. Give someone a conversation without scrolling away. Tell the truth you've been softening or hide nothing from the person you trust most. These are the practical ways faith becomes living, not theatrical. The last thing I want to leave you with is a story that came to me on the final night. I dreamed of a garden that was both wild and tended. There were weeds, sure, but also rows of plants that had been planted long ago and finally given space to root. In the dream, a voice said, "You were not meant to carry the whole orchard alone." I woke up thinking about the absurdity of trying to hold everything in my 2 hands. That image has become a compass for me. Steward what you can, release what you cannot, and be present enough to notice what needs tending. So here's my simple invitation. If something in you felt stirred by this week, act on it. Plant a small seed of attention in your daily life, let it grow. It might begin with a question. Who would I be if I stopped performing for the world and started listening for God? Then live that question for a day, then 2, then 7. Notice what answers arrive. They will not all be dramatic, but they will be true. If this video helped you, if it opened a small door in your life, consider staying connected. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, not because they need advice, but because they need permission to be quiet. If you're willing, comment below one small thing you can give up for a day and what you hope God might show you.
I read every comment, and they change the direction of my own prayers. I gave up everything for 7 days and learned that what God shows us is often less about proving and more about revealing. He revealed where I had misplaced my identity, what I needed to mourn, how mercy works, and how belonging is born in the nakedness of being seen. He invited me into practices that slow me down and make me brave enough to be honest. Most of all, he taught me that the life I wanted to save for later was the life waiting for me in the present. If you want to try this yourself, start small and be kind to yourself. If you want to go deeper, consider making a plan. Choose what you'll give up, decide who you'll ask to help you maintain it, and choose one simple practice, silence, journaling, unhurried prayer, to anchor each day. If you try it, come back and tell us what happened. Your story will help someone else take the first step. Thank you for staying with me to the end. If you've been holding your breath through the noise of life, let this be your exhale. You are not alone. There is a patient presence asking you to be real, to name the truth, and to live it. Hold that gently and take one small step today toward the life that is waiting for you when you stop trying to be everything for everyone.